Hello, welcome to the conversation in News Central Television. This is a program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Benga Aboroa.
And I am Rita Omodia. Today on the conversation, we will be looking at the demonstrations in Kenya, where the police say they have been instructed not to report any deaths during these protests.
And later on the show, we will look at Tunisia, where the security forces have been accused by Human Rights Watch of abusing black African migrants. They say Tunisia is not a safe third country for transfers of asylum seekers or migrants.
We're back to this issue again of asylum seekers and migrants, and you know of Kais Said. I really don't know his aim when you look at the policies he has created so far.
He's politicized this asylum deal, and you know, he's getting grants from the European Union, and they're overlooking the human rights records just to keep asylum seekers off the shores of Europe. And you know, you question where their humanity is, because they're busing these guys from the port city of Sfax to no man's land in the middle of the desert between the border of Tunisia and Libya. And I wonder why the African Union is so quiet.
I was about to say that why is the African Union not saying anything? Well, according to Kai Said, he's saying that he's not necessarily against black migrants, because that's another way to look at it again, because people have said this is quite a racist attempt by Kai Said. But he said that there have also been criminal elements in this migration and all that. And talking about human rights, back in Kenya, I mean, I really don't, who would have given such an order for police not to report them? Why would you even,
I mean, it's really intriguing, and it will be nice to hear what our guests have to say about it. And if there is a protest fatigue, because I heard on the second day the numbers dropped, but I don't know if they will be able to sustain this and how long they plan to keep up the protests in Kenya. But let's get straight to our first topic in Kenya, where the police say they have been instructed not to disclose deaths resulting from a crackdown and protests concerning tax hikes amidst a surge in the cost of living. However, an independent watchdog contradicted this claim on Thursday, asserting that at least 6 people were shot dead during this week's protest and 27 others in preceding weeks. The source of the unusual order remains unclear, but there are indications that it coincided with the political opposition's call for 3 days of demonstrations culminating on Friday.
Now, Kenyan police have faced a long-standing accusations from human rights organizations of using excessive force, and concerns are now growing about their tactics under the administration of President William Ruto, who was elected last year. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Kenya's president expressed gratitude to the police for maintaining peace. The country's Interior Minister, Kithure Kindiki, praised the police for acting with utmost professionalism and successfully containing acts of public hooliganism. And now joining us for this conversation, we have Stephen Semigabo. He's a political expert. He joins us from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. We also have Daniel Juma Omondi. He's Executive Director, Global Peace Foundation, Kenya, and he also joins us from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I'm going to begin with you, Daniel. And looking at this report, what evidence or sources support this claim that the Kenya police have been ordered not to report deaths during the recent crackdown on protests over tax increases and rising living costs? Who exactly is responsible for this order?
Thank you. I've also just had that, you know, and I think it's very, very unfortunate that the police, you know, can say that they have been instructed not to give reports of the death. This should be automatic. The police is an independent police, and they have an obligation to be able to report the number of casualties, those who died and those who got injured. So I think they have an obligation to the country because they are an independent police. And the question that they have been instructed is neither here and there. If they have been instructed, that is an illegal instruction, which the police should be able to be ignored. So the police should be independent, and should actually, one of the main roles of the police is to be able to protect the protesters, to ensure that the Kenyan people do not lose lives and properties are not destroyed. So they should conduct themselves with utmost transparency because they are there to serve the people of Kenya.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to bring in Stephen into the conversation. Now, Stephen, what's your assessment of the Kenyan police force and their response to civilians during this protest that we've witnessed in the last few weeks? And there have also been other allegations of police receiving orders outside the Kenyan Police Command and acting in the interest of the executive and not the public interest. A police officer was also reported posing as a journalist on Wednesday. So what are your thoughts on this and your assessment of the Kenyan police during this protest? Have they acted with utmost professionalism?
Thank you so much. I think if you're to look at the trend of events, starting from the earlier days when there were announcements about the proposed demonstrations and protests, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Internal Affairs, they were all, and all the judicial, legislative, and executive bodies within the country, they were more than willing to abide by the Constitution. And whenever these were communicated, these demonstrations were in a timely manner communicated, police would be there to provide and keep law and order. From that stage, I think things started to get out of hand from the time when there were a lot of violent protests. So when the protesters and the parties and all the people of interest, citizens, when they were acting in accordance to the law, there wasn't any kind of hesitation from the police and all the institutions of government in protecting them. But as the events started unfolding, a couple of protests turned violent. There was a lot of looting, there was a lot of bloodshed. There are some civilians were casualties to mobs and rioters. So at that point, you would like to find a fair assessment of what you would consider a constitutional demonstration and an act of saboteur and a threat against a domestic threat against the institution. I think that's where I would like to leave it for now.
Okay, now, Daniel, still on this issue, I mean, you're in Kenya. How verified is this report of the reported deaths? We know that there were protests, there have been disturbances, but we're seeing an independent watchdog talking about 6 people dying during this protest, and even the previous one, about 27, despite the alleged order to withhold such information. So how exactly can this report that we're seeing be verified?
I think the numbers that I've had, that was, as per yesterday, I had reports from the media of about 6 people having died from these demonstrations. So the nature of their deaths is what I cannot be able to say, whether they were killed by police bullets or whether I think some reports I had, some were shot, shot dead. Others were suffocated by tear gas. So I had that information in the media.
So there's no concrete report on it, because you say that the report is saying that police are withholding the number of people that have died. So where is the information coming from?
The information is coming from the local media. Local media. I think we have information also from human rights organizations and I think Amnesty International and I think that various independent bodies that are trying to come up with their independent number, but the numbers could go up, depending on because some people were injured and were admitted in hospitals. So we don't have. I cannot say whether there are 6 or more. But I think in the next day, I think after the end of this today's protest, it was a 3-day protest ending today. I think tomorrow we can be able to get a feel of how many people died during the last 3 days.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now, Stephen, can you provide more context on the opposition calls for this 3-day of demonstration that just ended today? What was the reason behind this 3 days, and how does it differ from past demonstrations. And how long do you think the opposition and the people have the appetite to protest? And I mean, it's gotten to the international community, and the world is on notice of what's been happening in Kenya. And do you see this protest ending anytime soon?
Thank you. The process began immediately after the recent elections. The opposition party felt there were a lot of issues and grievances that could not be resolved. And so there was a push to pressure the current government into something that has become now a common norm in Kenya called power sharing. And so the intent and for all purposes, the opposition is seeking to have the current government share power with it. And so they have looked for every opportunity from the look of things. It started with protests against the elections. It has moved on into something to do with the recent Finance Act, which seemingly has a lot of impact on a citizen of the country, whereby this Finance Act has a lot of increase in taxes, and so the poor man, the fellow citizen, feels quite squeezed, and so this has now become the mojo or the front-running umbrella under which the opposition is rallying citizens to protest against the costs of rising in terms of goods and mostly food. So when you look at it from the angle of a citizen, they have a just cause to protest and demand government to subsidize and make good on all the promises of the recent government. But also when you look at it from the political angle, whereby the opposition has looked at every possible opportunity to come in and demand for a power sharing deal, then you realize that it has been more of a political and highly politicized discussion and debate than that of an interest to the wananchi. That's how.
You talked about the wananchi, the common, the ordinary Kenyan. Does he know, or do you suspect, or are they sophisticated enough to know that, look, they're just pawns in this political game between the two gladiators, Raila Odinga and also President William Ruto? And are these protests done in political lines? Are they happening just in opposition strongholds, or it's a pan-Kenya protest and everybody is in on it?
Thank you. When you look at it, the trend of events, looking at the timelines ever since the call for protests began, they amassed a lot of support, and there was a lot of diverse participation in terms of the regions and across the board. And this began when the cause started to be raised as the rise of prices and the cost of living. So that appealed to the wananchi. And as the progress goes on, as they called for the 3-day riots, you realize that it's unsustainable for the wananchi, the mamamboga, ordinary people who have to live hand to mouth to go on a 3-day protest, because that way they do not have something that can sustain their families for the 3 days of the riots. And that's why you saw the numbers reducing. Wednesday was intense, Thursday there was a decrease, and people really at least went back and started looking for what to eat. And so that's the situation on the ground. There is the political, highly politicized debate of power sharing, and then there is the aspect of the common man who is striving to make ends meet.
All right, thank you so much, Daniel. I would like, thank you so much, Stephen. I'd like Daniel's take on all of this. Do you feel that these protests are still being politically motivated? And tell us about this Finance Act bill, the increase in tax that is actually propelling people to come out to protest.
Thank you. The protest, of course, As you know, the opposition, started these protests after the elections. And initially they had grievances, about the elections. They talked about opening the server. And then, they also complained about being co-opted into the IBC, selection panel. Then the first round actually ended after the president announced the bipartisan committee to be able to look at the grievances. But however, the members of parliament, from both sides, they began meeting in parliament, but suddenly they stopped, and the opposition walked out of these talks, blaming the government side for not being serious. And so at that time, it coincided with the Finance Act, the passing of the Finance Act 2023. And, the opposition has then since used the rode on the rising of price of fuel as a result of the Finance Act to be able to popularize, of course, their protest against the government. So right now, the people have a genuine plight about the rise of especially fuel, the Finance Act. But then the opposition is, they're the fuel behind it. So they're actually riding on it. And of course, I must, Raila Odinga has made it very, very clear that he's not interested in power sharing. The government has made it very, very clear that they're willing to talk, but they do not want to share power. So right now, I think even yesterday, the Raila, the Azimio people made it clear that they are not interested in sharing that. They actually referred to that bread. It's called nusumkati, half a bread. They said they don't want to share that rotten bread. And so right now, as we're talking, it is still kind of a dicey situation whereby they're not talking to one another. And this is a big problem because then, and as peace actors, we have been calling for dialogue. The religious community have been calling for dialogue. The business community is losing a lot of money every day. So the solution out of this will only come out of dialogue. But as we're talking today, both sides, both Raila Odinga and William Ruto are hardliners. They are both keeping a hardline situation. They don't want to talk to each other. And it's unfortunate that as they maintain their hardline positions, innocent people are dying. Businesses are losing billions of money every day. And it is the common man who are suffering from this very, very needless, unfortunate situation in the country.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now, Stephen, Daniel said the opposition is not interested in half a bread. Maybe they might be interested in sharing ugali. Now, following up from what Daniel said about the hardline nature of both protagonists in this drama we're witnessing in Kenya. The president is the commander-in-chief of the Kenyan Armed Forces. Everybody looks up to him. So people feel, it has to be the bigger person here. What measures has President William Ruto's government taken to address these genuine concerns? We don't care if the fuel is coming from the opposition to fuel it, but these are legitimate concerns. People are worried about the cost of living. Things have gone up. And also tactics by the Kenyan police during the crackdown on demonstrators. When was the last time he addressed the nation? And what's the government's latest communication with regards to this ongoing protest and the Kenyan police conduct?
According to the latest press release from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the government made communications to the state and the whole Republic of Kenya about the endeavors of the current government, which took office about 8 months ago. In their endeavors, they have been trying to work on their foreign relations. I think it was on Wednesday, at the start of the demonstrations when the President of the Republic of Kenya, Ruto, His Excellency, William Ruto was meeting the trade attaché from the United States in the Department of Agor. So you look at the country, and they've had state visits from Iran. They have had a lot of, in terms of diplomatic relations, they've had a lot of work going on in trying to work on bilateral agreements, and then this is all in an endeavor to strengthen the economy, to strengthen their currency. And this would now deal with the underlying causes, which are now the fuel prices, the food prices. So there is a deliberate move by the government to try and resolve this. However, I don't think there's any previous government in Kenya that has had a rough time in terms of their past days, 100 or...
I mean, it's not even a year since he was sworn in as president.
Yeah. So that's the situation. That's the catch-22. As the government is trying too hard to address these issues, then there's this political pressure that is coming in. And so from the look of things, as stated by Daniel, the hardline approach by both protagonists is causing a lot of challenges to the citizen, because as leaders, democracy is not to rule, they're not going to rule, they rule people. They need to have the interests of the people at heart. And so there's going to need to be compromises on both leaders.
Now, Daniel, how much challenge is it giving William Ruto's administration? We talked about the fact that it's barely a year since he's been in power, and we're also looking at the way he's treating the protests, addressing all of this. How much popularity does he have? How is your assessment of how he's dealing with the whole issue, at the same time trying to deal with the economy in Kenya?
I think the president, having just been sworn into office, is barely 8 months into office. And I share the views of everyone that he needs to be given time to be able to stabilize the economy. 8 months is not enough to be able to assess someone. So I believe that really the opposition here has not been very, very sincere. Even if they were in power, they would not be able to stabilize the economy in such a short time. So personally, if you ask me, I believe that we needed to give the president a little bit more time to put all his fiscal policies in place so that we can be able to tackle the problem that we are facing. Actually,
But would you approve of the way he's handling the protests going on in Kenya? People are dying. We talk about reports of...
I don't approve. I don't approve the issue of the police killing people. The protests are protected by Article 37 of the Constitution. You cannot imagine a country where people cannot protest peacefully. Right now, even in Israel, people are protesting, even in France. So the police role is just to ensure that the protesters are protected, and also that the lives and properties are protected. But they do not have the authority to use live bullets to kill protesters. I think they have other alternative means that they can be able to use. So I think this is a problem on the part of the police, who are supposed to be independent. The police commissioner, the IG, Inspector General of Police, is supposed to be independent. He's not supposed to get instructions on how to handle the protest. He needs to handle it as independently as possible. So this is the biggest problem that we're having. And again, I think our police still do not have adequate training on how to handle protests. I think this is what needs to be done. And also this is the reason why I'm blaming the opposition, because you are getting young people, children, to come out into the streets, and yet you know very, very well that the police do not have the skills to be able to handle protests maturely. And also some of the protesters have to be blamed because they are carrying stones, they're carrying crude weapons, and they're throwing stones back at the police. So both sides really, really are really to blame for the loss of lives and deaths. But the government, since they are the government in power, they say that to him much is given, much is expected. Yeah. They have the buck stops with them to ensure that these lives are protected, to ensure that lives do not get lost during these protests. And this is really, really problematic. So as long as people are going to die, I think the international community will be looking at Kenya to see how this government continues to handle these protests.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm afraid we're out of time on this segment of the program. I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Stephen Semigabo, political expert, and also Daniel Jamal Mundi, Executive Director at Global Peace Foundation in Kenya. We do appreciate your time and contribution on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching The Conversation on News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll switch gears to Tunisia, where the Human Rights Watch has frowned against abuses against black African migrants in Tunisia. We'll bring you details of this and more when we return.